It's terrifying time, folks, and Art the Clown has solidified himself as a horror icon with the past two Terrifier movies. Known for their over-the-top violence and gore, along with Art's creepy and cartoonish demeanor, the Terrifier series has become a bit of a cult classic in a lot of ways, and now with Terrifier 3, rumors have been circulating around the intensity and the gore factor. With a bigger budget, the creator Damien Leone and the crew is determined to raise the bar yet again. So having caught it today, does Terrifier 3 live up to the hype and does it meet expectations in the gore aspect and as a movie aspect? Let's find out in our shocking review of Terrifier 3. So Terrifier 3 takes place after the events of the second film, as Sienna and her brother try to rebuild their lives, all while Art is doing what he does best, which is going on an absolute rampage unlike any other. The horrors are brought into the Christmas season, as the movie takes place during the holiday season, with plenty of Santa references and Christmas trees and all the great holiday festivities, at least before they're covered in blood. As Art paints the town red, it's really no surprise that the movie is rated NC17, which is extremely rare for movies nowadays, especially ones that are backed by bigger companies and distributors looking to make their money back at the box office. From the very opening scene, the message is sent very clearly to the audience, almost as a warning, that what you're about to witness is extremely gory and violent against people of all ages. A lot of people were allegedly walking out of the movie or throwing up. I doubt that it was very common, as they're trying to make it more obvious and make it seem like people are really walking out of this insane thing. But seriously, if you are going into this not expecting anything less than sheer gore and extreme kills, then I don't know what to tell you. Once the movie gets going after the extreme first scene, it really does not let up. It has the audience as a chokehold. Art's kill count is definitely the highest it's been, and with a bigger budget, they push the boundaries as much as they can. While there's a million different grotesque ways to show kills on screen, I feel like they cover a lot of these in a lot of different ways in the 2-hour runtime, impressively. Switching over to the characters, it really does just follow Sienna from the first movie and some of her family members, aunt, uncle, her cousin, and her brother from the first movie, as they look to spend the holidays together. To be honest, there really isn't much of a story going on here. It slightly progresses the characters just a hair, more specifically Sienna, but it really doesn't do much in that department either. It would have been nicer to flesh out the story a bit more, in my opinion. Now, I know, we're all here for the kills and for Art, we're not there for the story. And while this is true and it delivers mainly on that front, I feel like fleshing out a more creative story would have made it a more well-rounded and more impactful movie than just relying heavily on just Art's kills. The movie knows what it is, and for that, I understand that it understands its forte and everything, but it leans a little too much into that in my opinion, and I feel like it needed just a little bit more balance. I'm not asking for too much. Speaking of Art, he's back in full effect, except now with a companion, Victoria from the first movie, and for her appearance in the second movie. They have sort of a double team thing going on, kind of like the Joker and Harley Quinn kind of way, at least in some of the kills. Personally, wasn't a huge fan of the scenes with her in it, especially with her talking. I found it to take away from some of the kills and Art's presence as evil. Having Art doing his thing and somebody else talking throughout just didn't really add anything. Don't get me wrong, the prosthetics and the acting are very good for that character. The visual of the character is absolutely horrifying as it is unsettling. Imagine any other character that doesn't talk having a sidekick with them. It's just not the same thing in my opinion, it just takes it away. But let's jump into the actual kills and the gore, which is what we're all here to see, and boy, where do I begin? This is hands down and unsurprisingly the goriest and most extreme movie I've seen this year. If you don't do well with blood, stay far, far away from this one. The kills are absolutely brutal, shocking, and way over the top. I will say that if you can stomach the first two, you should be fine, but again, it does take it up a whole nother level. I will say that the prosthetics, makeup, and practical effects are a work of art. Keeping with its ground roots history, everything in Terrifier 3 is done by hand. No CGI or graphics or effects like that, and it absolutely works in spades, with buckets of blood and incredibly realistic limbs, faces, skulls, bones, and pretty much everything in the human body, the entire anatomy, is seen. People are quite literally cut open with their insides spilling out, limbs are consistently chopped off, and you see everything in full minute detail, and so many other things. and this is not exclusive to just human adults either. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's just absolutely diabolical. The sheer amount of carnage is also insane, and it easily passes its NC17 test with flying colors. Like the Saw movies, people really come to the movie for the kills, and this will scratch that morbid itch of yours if that's your thing. I found the end scene to be especially brutal, only because of the context of it and how truly evil it really is. If the movie didn't make it clear already that Art is the embodiment of evil itself. So some might even say the devil or anything like that. Visually, the movie's really good looking actually. There's this sort of light vintage sort of gray that they have going on, and it makes it feel like an 80s movie. I'm a huge fan of that. Movies like X use it, and I just think it brings it back, and honestly, this is the best looking of the three movies, and rightfully so, with a much bigger budget. I also really enjoyed the sort of retro and vaporwave type music that presents itself. You know, this movie doesn't take place in the 80s, but it has that sort of atmosphere, that kind of aesthetic to it. It adds a little bit extra to the movie, and yes, I ended up shazamming the credit song on the way out. Going back to Art, David Howard Thornton, the actor who plays Art, is back in full effect and does another great performance without ever saying a word. With his background, Thornton is able to use only his expressions to not only create an unsettling, but cheeky and funny at times character, even when what he's doing is absolutely horrific. I actually laughed out loud several times throughout this, and it is cheeky, you know, it's tongue-in-cheek for what's happening, and because of his funny mannerisms and facial expressions, it truly does drive the point home, which makes sense because the actor himself has spoken about using classic comedians such as Charlie Chaplin or Mr. Bean as inspirations, and considering his experience in his past with comedy, it really does check out, and it's crazy how much personality you can add to a character by never even saying a word. And as always, the makeup on him is spot on. It's not as intricate as it is for someone like Victoria, but again, the look of Art is iconic nowadays. Now, if we're talking about performances, Lauren Lavera is actually excellent as Sienna. Once again, she covered a wide range of extreme emotions, and honestly, I think she's a very promising actress. I'd like to see more of her going forward. What I thought was very interesting was that the movie takes its time to look at some of the psychological and traumatic effects that the events of the second movie had on her specifically. It makes it a lot more realistic, and it makes Art's carnage even more disturbing when you see the aftermath in her everyday life, to the point where she needs to get psychiatric help for herself. This is especially in full effect in the second half of the movie as well, and I give the movie props for going in that direction. Everyone acts pretty well, from the fellow family members like the aunt and the uncle to the young actress who plays Gabby, along with all the extras that meet their brutal demise. It's not easy to scream at the top of your lungs while you're getting killed, and for that I always give a lot of props to horror movie actors. Everyone really holds it down, everyone except one person that really stood out, and if you've watched the other movies, specifically the second one, you know who I'm referring to. Personally, I think that Elliot Fullman is not great as Jonathan, Sienna's brother. He's very one note and is just very stiff whenever I saw him on the screen, and it definitely shows when he's acting alongside Lauren Lavera or other actors for that matter. It's unfortunate because it's really something that stood out to me a lot during the movie. It took me out of the scenes even when he's not even saying anything. It's just not like the most emotive actor, if that makes sense. This was the same in the second movie, but unfortunately wasn't really improved upon. You know, I'm not trying to hate against the actor, but it's just not it. Like in the second movie, the double down on the more fantasy and otherworldly aspects of the Terrifier. There is some things that are touched upon a little more when it comes to that otherworldly aspect of it, but part of me wished that they just stayed away from it. Because they didn't, the other side of me wishes that they answered a few more questions if they're going to take that approach to it. The movie ends with some unanswered questions, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do for the next Terrifier movie. To go more in depth with the story aspect and fleshing it out, like I mentioned, I wish there was more to the story or something to care about a little more other than the characters we already know. I think personally Terrifier would probably work better if they had a group of people, maybe a group of Art's past victims that escape, or if you want to go more generic route, maybe a group of college students on a trip or something, giving his victims a little more character and making us care a little bit more. A lot of the kills are just randoms without a backstory. Imagine the idea I'm mentioning in a specific environment where Art is completely brutalizing a group of people that the audience has at least met. This to me would be even more interesting, and one might argue that it would be extremely generic, but I just wish it was a different scenario sometimes, you know? They could have even had it be Jonathan or Sienna's new friend group, or maybe someone they're hanging out with or stuff like that. Something generic like that, just something to make it a little more effective. All in all though, I really did enjoy the movie, and it's really exactly what you would come to expect from the series. I've always liked it for being more unique and not being being afraid to be totally over the top and crazy with the kills. Terrifier continues to push the boundaries, and I can only imagine what's next in the series. As a final verdict, the kills are extreme but entertaining in a way that only a movie like Terrifier can do. Performances are pretty good throughout, with a couple of highlights and one or two lowlights, and the visuals and soundtrack are really good. The prosthetics and the FX are a 10 out of 10 on their own right, but the lack of story and some of the direction knocks the movie down to a respectable but still very good 7.5 out of 10. Let me know below what you thought of Terrifier 3, and if you like this content, be sure to hit that subscribe button, stay up to date with the latest. I'll catch you on the next video.